have been trying to get this thing fixed.
Starting off the RDF LT, this $70 premium will set you back Spookston video from how much it scares him whenever they make one of these tanks. When the update came out, this tank was just, nothing about it was right. The reload time was completely wrong to begin with. It would be 70 RPM or reload every 0.8 seconds. And at least they fixed that. And the best part is that was literally like the front page of the brochure said the reload. Like I don't get how you can miss it. It was just the front page of the brochure. But moving on to just the other problems that Spookston has addressed a lot better than I can address. The gun shroud, just I don't know how you get the holes wrong in that. You just look up a picture on Google, you press images, you go down, and it's literally right there. You can look at the tank. It doesn't have that fuel filler cap. For moving on that, we also have the whole gun problem where the ammo is still wrong, still has not been fixed, and I don't think it ever will be fixed. And the funniest part is that the ammo that was supposed to be exported, that was a downgraded version of the ammo for this tank, outperforms the ammo for this tank. So the downgraded exported version of the ammo is better than the ammo that the tank itself gets. And I don't know why, really. I think they just sort of went whatever balance and then they sort of gave up on it. But I really don't know. I can't tell you. Just watch this video on the subject. It's a lot better. Moving on to the M44, we have the every tech tree the sameinator because it's coming to 6 nations in the game. And starting with its problems, it has the wrong number of crew. For some reason it has a crew of 7, despite the tank literally only having 5 seats. So I don't know where the other crew comes from. It has some visual errors, like the crew phasing through the sides of the tank, the suspension clips on terrain improperly, and it randomly decides to phase through walls whenever it feels like it. The armor model also has a couple issues. The jerry cans along the outside of the tank just don't have a hitbox for some reason and won't absorb any shots. The tank doesn't have any shock absorbers modeled. The 2 main exhausts and the APU is not modeled, and the road wheel arms and travel lock are just not even on the tank. They're not there. They should be there. The 50 cal has this problem of it not firing after the commander dies, despite being operated by a separate machine gunner, but this was just recently patched, so that's kind of good. The propellant in the rear of the tank is scaled up for some reason. The 6 charges they scaled to the size of the box that they're put in, which makes them just abnormally larger for some reason, and I don't know why they did it. They must have thought that they fit perfectly in the box, but they're much smaller than the box they fit in. And specifically for the Italian one, the last minor thing, is that the flag is in the complete wrong location, so the camouflage is unhistorical. There should be no flag on the side of the tank. It should be on the front of the tank, and not the sides.
The missile knows where it is at all times.
Moving on to the Strela 10M, it's coming to 3 nations in the game, Germany, UK, and Italy. And I haven't found anything unhistorical about this thing. I was trying to dive through some documents, but the main thing I just want to point out is that there should be other options out there, especially for the UK, where there's plenty. The Roycat SAM should have been added a long time ago, and yes, I know it wasn't fully completed, and yes, Gaijin still has a full model finished of it and decided not to add it to the game, but it would be a ton more unique than another copy-paste Strela 10. And the G6 HVM, which was also in the leaks, would have been a ton more unique and interesting, and the G6 HVM would have been a lot more capable with multi-track and really long-range missiles. But I don't know, just copy paste for a few nations, I guess. Getting to the PzH 2000, and oh boy, here we go. Gaijin just can't ever make an SPG right, and just, if you want a prime example, don't even get started on the Sholaf, because you can spend an hour talking about all the problems with that tank. So I guess we'll start with the armor. It has a bunch of armor missing. The armor around the cannon breech and gun mantelet just is missing. It doesn't exist. The spall liners around the entire hull and turret of the tank are just non-existent and never were added to the game. On top of that, the Panzer 2000 HUs, which is the Hungarian one, doesn't have the composite armor around the AC unit or the driver's hatch. The engine is just inaccurate. The engine has a wrong top speed of 50 kilometers an hour. It should be 60 kilometers an hour. The engine RPM is 3,200 instead of its real life 2,700 RPM, where it should be at. And there should be 4 reverse gears, not 8 reverse gears. Moving on to just the shells, the M107 shells were widely nerfed at launch and had a lower velocity than even the short-barreled M109 for the USA. It was set at 580 meters a second when it should have been 940 meters a second. But at least, you know, at least that got fixed. The gun depression is wrong. It should extend to -2.5 degrees instead of -2 degrees. It is missing one of its primary HE shells, which was DM11, one of Germany's main short-range HE that they would use. It's very similar to L15A2. If you ever use the Type 99, it's nearly identical to that. And for some reason, it uses American smoke shells, the M110s, when it should be the German DM115s or the DM125s. Moving on to the reload rate, and oh boy, this is a fun little deep dive. It is currently set to a 10-second reload in an ace crew, which is not even the average, even if you don't include the burst fire. It should have a 3-round burst of 1 round every 3 seconds. Then it should be on an average of 10 RPM, aka a reload of 6 seconds, and then eventually slowing down to a 6.6 RPM for a reload of 9 seconds. They fixed this by giving a first stage of 2 rounds for 5 seconds for an artificial burst, but it still doesn't fix the whole sustain rate, and the artificial burst is still inaccurate, so I don't know why they even bothered adding the burst, but I guess it's better than 10 seconds. Way better than 10 seconds, so I guess we'll take it. The Hungarian machine gun on the PzH 2000 should be the FN Mag instead of the Mk.IV, because Hungary doesn't have that on the Panzer 2000. And another weird glitch is that the crew will not change positions. So basically, if your crew get knocked out, like let's say your gunner gets knocked out, but your machine gunner's alive, or your driver, I mean, they won't swap. So you'll be stuck without a driver or gunner if your commander's still alive, or you'll be stuck without a driver if your gunner and commander are still alive. It's a weird thing that this tank has, and I really don't know why. But yeah, that's I think that's all of it. I probably missed a couple bug reports, but out of all the ones I've read with actual documentation, those were all the ones I could nail down as completely wrong. And I think this is probably one of the most inaccurate tanks added in this update, and was probably rushed the most.
12 o'clock, 800 yards. I see it. It's a goddamn Tiger.
The Tiger Ost, Tiger West, and Ostwind Ost are a brand new type of premium pack that Gaijin is trying out. For 35 bucks, you get all 3 of these vehicles, and I think it's a really good pack for the price, and actually should come to more nations in the game as something like this. The only problems I have found are for the Tiger Ost, which is the Eastern Front Tiger, and the problem with this is that it's a copy paste of the Tiger H1, which comes with some issues when it's the Eastern Front Tiger. It should have a different lower cupola, the one that's on the Heavy Tank number 6 and the Tiger E, and not the H1's cupola. It should have the better armor mantlet, same one as on the Tiger E and not the Tiger H1. And on top of that, the Eastern Front Tigers had this problem where they would remove the road wheels, because if they didn't, the mud and terrain would jam into them. So they were very often removed. So on this vehicle specifically, it should be also removed. And those were the only issues I found with it. Otherwise, it's a pretty good bundle.
Best hope not pointed at you.
The BMD-4M, which is a brand new premium pack coming to Russia, sitting at 9.3, is available in the Gaijin store. The biggest problem with this thing is that they promised the future BMD would be available in the tech tree during the summer marathon event. This event, which was about 3 years ago now, gave away the prototype BMD-4, just called the BMD-4, which you can find in the store for about 100 Gaijin coins, was the prototype version. This version is the main production variant called the BMD-4M, and it is basically the only main production variant of the BMD-4 if you don't count any troop carrier variants or one-off prototypes available. So I really think this thing should have been in the tech tree, especially since Russia doesn't have any tech tree IFV above 9.0. And I think some other one-off prototype, if they really wanted a 9.3 premium, could have been added. But moving to any historical issues, the biggest one is the 100mm gun. The rate of fire for the 100mm 2A70 gun should be 10 RPM, so a 6-second reload instead of 5 seconds, so it's faster than what it should be. And the other small issue is that the machine gun should be the PKTM and not the PKT. But besides this tank being a premium for some reason, which a lot of people have been throwing complaints about for, I think should have been in the tech tree, 100%.
It's bigger. It's badder.
The HQ-17 is a brand new Chinese SAM based on the Tor M1, basically just with better missiles. China's actually pretty lucky here as it's in a folder rather than being a fully separate researchable vehicle, which means it's only 200,000 RP instead of like 390 or some absurd amount of RP to research. The only actual issue with this vehicle though is the missile's 3D model. There's a slight 3D model error for firing the missiles, with the 4 fins of the rear being a slightly wrong size and shape compared to their real life counterpart. But besides that, this thing has been relatively historical, so that's good.
Speed. I am speed.
VBCI for France is finally a tech tree variant of the premium VBCI that I know French mains have been waiting absolutely forever to get their hands on, and I'm glad that a free version is finally available. However, starting with its historical issues, its armor has got some major problems. The VBCI should be rated to stop 14.5mm API ammo, but it can barely stop even 12.7mm APIs, and it will go right through them. The engine has its own problem. The engine 3D model inside the vehicle is significantly smaller than its real-life counterpart and should be much larger, especially in the front. The ammo has its own issues, where the French M811 made by Nexter has a higher muzzle velocity than the General Dynamics M811. So basically the same rounds made by Nexter have a higher muzzle velocity. Moving on to the gun, most of the gun's issues come from the audio. The cannon sounds for this tank are based on the Italian KBA-02, but the issue with this is that that gun has a higher fire rate than the VBCI, making shots out of sync and sounding a bit off sometimes. Moving on to the coaxial gun, the coaxial machine gun for the tank is permanently stuck and it just doesn't allow you to aim at all in the slightest. Another small issue is that the crew positions are in a bit of a weird spot. They're basically placed lower than where they should be sitting. The crew members should be up, so specifically the driver and commander should be higher up in the vehicle. And lastly, the commander's sight it doesn't work. It just shows only gray. But yeah, that's all the problems with it so far. But hey, I'm glad French mains finally have this thing.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bah! Bah!
CV90 Mk.IV is a simple and new fun addition to Sweden, giving you spikes and a 30mm Bushmaster. Sitting at rank 8 and a battle rating of 10.7 is kind of weird though. Probably should have been a rank 7, but whatever. Its biggest historical issue is that it's missing a search and track function. Unlike Gaijin not wanting to add the search and track to regular CV90s due to how the tracking specifically worked. If you ever watch a video about it, it's kind of specific about what it does. But the Mk.IV had a much more advanced IRST tracking site with a full computerized system. So this should definitely get IRST tracking as it fits the criteria of many others in the game. Another problem is that it doesn't have its spall liner. All CV90s from the 9040C onwards had spall liners. So the Mk.IV, produced way after the 9040C, should definitely have a spall liner. And the last and smallest thing is that the turret basket, which is right below the gun, is designated as the horizontal aiming device. So any hit in this massive turret basket will basically disable you from turning the turret at all, which probably should be just reduced.
That's a tank!
The namer Tsrikhon is a brand new cool namer for Israeli players to use, all 5 of them. It being a namer, however, and on the Merkava hull, basically comes the whole Israeli problem in War Thunder of the Merkavas being horrendously modeled and the armor being significantly weaker than what it's supposed to be in real life. I won't go into the Merkava problems here. I think that's another video for another time, but just know that your armor is going to be much weaker than what you'd expect for such a massively armored tank. Its biggest historical issue right now is its commander and gunner sights. So basically in real life, the optical zoom should be times 25 with an NFOV of 1.7 degrees times 1.3 degrees, and an optical zoom of 1.7 degrees to 25 degrees for the flare. Moving on to the degrees of freedom, it should have a -20 and +60 degrees of freedom, and in game it only has -14. So -14 just increased to -20. The last and final issue, just talking about this armor specifically, is that the side skirts should be completely composite. In game, they're only half composite, with the lower parts being completely steel. The entire thing should be a composite sheet.
We got a #1 victory royale, yeah.
The EF-2000, also known as the Eurofighter, is a brand new 14.0 jet coming to top tier for the German Air Force, and it gives them a top tier capable jet after who knows how long being stuck with the F4F ice and the MiG-29G. But starting with its issues, it's got the wrong name. The current name of the Eurofighter in the game for Germany is the EF2000 Typhoon Block 10 T2. However, the in-game model and the official designated name by Germany is the Eurofighter Tranche 3A Block 25. So in order to make it a bit more historically accurate, it should just be a simple name change, nothing too crazy at all. There's a bug with the Lightning 3 pod, which is the targeting pod you use for the air-to-ground missiles. If you have a targeting optics view keybind, it won't actually switch to the pod, but I assume this is a relatively simple fix and will probably be pushed through. It has probably the biggest problem with all the Eurofighters right now is the TWS scan issues. Basically, if you run track while scan on a wide field of view for all the Eurofighters, they won't track basically anything because they won't update fast enough for you to get solid locks. But if you put the TWS in the shorter FOV mode, it'll work properly. So it seems to be just an issue with the large field of view one. Another issue, the Mach cone. The Mach cone is a lot forward on the aircraft and it's near where the cockpit is, and it should be a bit more towards the rear of the jet. For the flares, there's a glitch with just the EF2000 where if you don't have the MAWS research in the modification screen, you just can't use the flares. I don't know why, just can't use them. And the last and final thing is that the outer pylons, they shouldn't be able to be removed because these pylons contain the ITSPL, which is the integrated tip stub pylon launcher, and they should not be able to be removed at all. But yeah, that's all the problems with the Eurofighter right now.
Another one.
Moving on to the British Eurofighter, the Typhoon FGR.4, there's not much specifically wrong with this variant of the Eurofighter, but there's a couple small stuff. The main one is that there is a model gap. So basically right around the engine bleed air heat exchanger, there's a missing texture and a gap into the inside of the aircraft, which basically allows you to see directly through it to the other side. If you play simulator a lot, there's an HMD display issue where basically the HMD will always display SRAM no matter what missile is selected, and there should just be a simple texture update for that. For the TWS, it has the same problem as I said before on the German Eurofighter, where the TWS doesn't update properly. And another thing specific to this variant of the Typhoon is that it has a gun clipping issue, where basically the gun on the side of the aircraft actually clips and shoots through the fuselage, so it should be moved in its positioning a little bit more.
Another one. Another one.
The F2000A, or the Eurofighter for Italy, actually has the least amount of issues out of the three. The only problems it has is that the gun still clips, like on the British Eurofighter, it has the same exact problem. And it has the TWS scan issue that both the other Eurofighters have. So overall, there's just those two things that need to be fixed.
Hello, how are you? I am under the water.
The Su-33 is a brand new cool top tier jet for Russia that sadly has no tech tree variant in the game right now. Starting with its issues, it has this aileron issue where if you break off the flaps, it'll break off the ailerons instead for some reason. It has the default afterburner color of red when they added this new blue afterburner effect when the Su-34 was added, so it should have the same afterburner effects. For the canards, for a weird reason, if you're playing in first person, if you're in simulator a lot or something, the canards will not actually move at all. They only will move if you are in third person for some reason. And lastly, the fuel gauge inside the cockpit doesn't actually move at all and doesn't work properly.
Revenez ici, je vous détruirai jusqu'à ce qu'il n'y a plus de...
The Rafale C F3 is a brand new competitive top tier jet for France. The main issue with it was that it didn't have its 8 missile loadout on release, but thankfully Gaijin finally added it to it. Starting with its main historical issues, it has the wrong engine name. Basically, the engine should be the M884E due to the Rafale F3 entering service in 2018. These engines, the M884Es, entered service in 2012. With some texture issues around the cockpit, the exterior cockpit model has some weird gaps and clipping issues. This will create some issues with skins and other smaller stuff. And another thing as well is that the canopy should be not coated clear. It had a golden coating that's almost orange that should be applied to it. Starting with the brand new Thailand subtree that was added this patch, the AlphaJet TH. Most of the problems with the subtree lie in the fact that all this stuff is copy pasted over from other nations, not taking into account the differences in nature for these exported equipment and the equipment that Thailand had access to. Starting with the AlphaJet though, the main issue is the RWR. German and exported AlphaJets had an auditory RWR, the EL7073, that's currently on the F104 ASA, so this ship should get an RWR. The new Thailand F5T SCU, completely unique to Japan at the moment, has only one major issue, and that has to do with its weapons hardpoints. So basically the F5T SCU should be capable of using the underwing pylons similar to the F5E SCU, giving it access to 4 missiles in total rather than 2, giving it a much better offensive capability. It also should be capable of carrying 9 Ms on the wingtip pylons, but due to its battle rating I can assume why it doesn't have that. And it also is missing its loadout of AGM-65Ds, which would give it a lot more of a competitive edge for a cast, especially something Japan is completely lacking in.
Altitude.
The Thailand F-16A OCU is a brand new Block 15 F-16 in the Japanese tech tree. This new F-16 has 2 main issues, one of them being the flares. Basically, the last 15 of the 60 flares on the OCU fire forwards through the cockpit rather than down. It's a bit of a weird and surprising bug. But the main issue is the missiles. Basically, the F-16A OCU was equipped with the APG-66 V2 radar. This radar does not have any AMRAAM capability, and the ship should not have AMRAAMs at all. They gave this thing the APG-66S, which it should not have. Thailand lacked AMRAAMs until they received the ADF variant of the F-16, and the OCUs lacked any AMRAAM capability at all until the MLU upgrade program, which would be a completely separate jet.
Resolution, airstrikes.
The Thailand A7E is the American A7E copied over into the Japanese tech tree. However, due to being copied directly, it comes with a whole host of historical issues. Starting with its RWR, it currently uses the AN/ALR-45V RWR, when by 1989 it should have the AN/ALR-45F V RWR. But the main issue right now is the missiles. Thailand never once purchased or received AIM-9Gs. These should be completely replaced with AIM-9Ps and P4s that are already in the game, so it should be simple to copy paste them over. Another issue is walleyes. Thailand also never purchased walleyes, but they did have AGM-65Bs in stock. A7Es were fully capable and certified to fire AGM-65Bs, and the Navy really never used them for obvious reasons, but it is still completely feasible for them to use it. I would suggest giving the A7E AGM-65Bs to give it more cast options, and if anyone has more historical documentation on this, feel free to leave a comment or send me a message. Last but certainly not least, the Thailand Aviator Slate. This is a brand new Harrier in the Japanese tech tree. The only issue with this thing is its RWR. It currently has the ARI 18223 copied over from the British CR3 model, when it should have the Sky Guardian 200. This RWR, which was upgraded by the Spanish Navy in 1989, is the ARI 18228/19, where the same RWR is found on the Sea Harrier FA2. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching all the way into the end, and I hope you enjoy your holidays if you guys are going anywhere. I will display the amount of issues for both air and ground right now, and I'll catch you guys all on the next one.